What is your aim over the next 10 days at the summit?
Yes, there are naturally some aims. The main aim is just to show what we do and what we want to do in future, what we believe that is necessary to do in future, and to discuss that with the delegates who are here, who are working on climate change, and to get a result which is positive for the climate.
And as an experienced ambassador of many years, you, I'm sure, will appreciate the work that diplomats and delegates are doing, probably at the moment, in trying to formulate an agenda. Do you, in your experience, do you think that a comprehensive deal can come out of Rio+20?
Yes, I hope very much so, and I think there's a good chance, because you see, 20 years ago it was the start, and it was quite a successful start. But now, 20 years later, we have learned a lot, and everyone has learned that we can't wait for the others to do things, that everyone has to do his work at home, and that, let's say, climate change and the results of climate change in every country depend very much on the work in that country. That climate change is not just a subject for the UN and for the world community, but for every country and everyone, because let's take an example. If the rainforest in Brazil would disappear, the first country to have great difficulties with it would be Brazil. Later on, other countries too. It would be a catastrophe for the world, but the first people to suffer would be those living around that place. And therefore it is important that we have learned that. And on the other hand, that the world community shows solidarity with each other. Because you see, in the beginning, when we thought about development, we just thought that the industrial states would teach the other ones how to do things. But now everyone is taught, and everyone has to change his life in a certain way and has to change his economy. Therefore, it's so important that it's clear that everyone is involved and everyone has to change his economy, his way of life, to get a better life for everyone. But it's not just a part of the world which has to change, but everyone has to change.
What experience can Germany bring to this debate? I think it was a few weeks ago Germany passed quite a significant milestone in the amount of renewable energy it produced. It may have been 40 or 50%, I forget the exact figure, but what do you think Germany can actually bring to the table in terms of the experience and the industries inside Germany that are investing in renewable technologies?
Yes, naturally, we have first learned a lot on how to produce energy with less pollution and less CO2. On the other hand, we have learned a lot how to use the energy, to produce with less energy and to have a high quality of life with less energy. Because, you see, climate change doesn't mean that the quality of life of every one of us should go down. That's not really what we want. We should at least keep our quality or level of quality of life, but to do it with less use of the world resources.
And turning to something you mentioned before we started, which was the private sector, it's an on-running theme. Many people say we need to get more involvement from the private sector. How can we achieve that?
Well, there are many ways to do so. First, there's a certain interest by the private sector because they have developed products, production means, lots of things which they want to sell because that's their job. And naturally, there are states which don't have the money to pay for it, and naturally there we can pay. But on the other hand, we have to make it clear, we have to change things with us too. Let's say in the fiscal sector, for example, to get advantages for renewables. It shouldn't be forever an advantage, but you need to initiate in the beginning by fiscal means or other financial means the introduction of new techniques. You have to make it very clear that subsidies shouldn't be forever, but in the beginning you sometimes need them. And that's where the state comes in and has to give incentives to the private sector, first to development things, and then on the other hand to give them to other countries too, to other economies. And I think there we can do a lot, and I'm quite sure that in Rio we see a lot of advancement in this sector.
And a final one, looking ahead to next week in the talks there, we had President Dilma visited the park here today in her helicopter, but there won't be that many world leaders attending next week. There may be a few, but there won't be that many. Do you think is that a real problem if we're expecting a decision to be made next week?
I don't think so. It's naturally a pity that this important conference is not as well attended as President Dilma would have hoped. I myself, I'm very sorry about it, but you see, there are other problems in the world too. We have in Europe a lot of problems in the EU, in the Eurozone. We have in the Middle East a lot of problems, and that means not everyone of the world leaders is free to go to that place where he would like or she would like to go. But I think the important countries are well represented, at least on a very high ministerial level, many on the head of governments or head of state. And I think there's a chance to make a lot of decisions, positive decisions, and to advance things. But naturally, it's clear you can't solve climate change problems in one conference at one time. You see, we have now 20 years since first Rio conference, and certainly we will have a Rio+30 and maybe a Rio+40. Because there is always something more to do. But the great thing is that things advance, and I'm quite sure that Rio will advance things in climate change, in international cooperation, and it will be a milestone again.